The meeting hall of the Galactic Council sat at the center of a space station so large that 3 Earth moons could have fit inside its outer ring. Every wall was made of a crystal-like material that shifted color depending on who was speaking: pale blue for calm, deep red for anger, soft gold for agreement. On that particular cycle, the walls had been pale blue for a very long time. That was about to change. Ambassador Lena Voss floated her chair forward, planting her elbows on the curved table that stretched around the chamber in a wide oval. She was a short woman with dark eyes that never blinked quite as often as the other species expected. She wore no medals, no ceremonial cloth, no glowing insignia. Just a plain gray uniform with a small patch, a blue circle with a single white dot inside it. Earth, the whole of humanity reduced to a dot. Across from her sat representatives of 41 species. The Vorkai, tall and silver-skinned, who had built the first faster-than-light lane 2,000 years ago. The Drenethi, jellyfish-like creatures who communicated through bioluminescent pulses and considered war a form of art. The Seal, a hive mind of insect-like beings who had never lost a single negotiation in recorded galactic history. And at the head of the table, High Chancellor Orin of the Myrati, a being who had personally overseen 300 years of what the Council proudly called the Long Peace. Humanity had been a member of the Council for exactly 11 years. 11 years of sitting quietly, voting when asked, paying their dues in raw materials and shipping routes, and never once causing a scene. The other species had decided, somewhere along the way, that humans were harmless. Eager newcomers. Children at the table of adults. That was their first mistake. Chancellor Orin let his 4 eyes move slowly across the room before settling on Voss. His voice came out smooth, practiced, the kind of voice that had ended arguments before they started for centuries. Ambassador Voss, the Council has reviewed humanity's objection to the Rel expansion clause. We have also reviewed it the 3 times before this. The answer, as it has always been, remains unchanged. The clause stands. Voss did not react. She simply looked at him. The Rel expansion clause, she said, hands 3-star systems to the Vorkai Directorate without a single vote from the inhabited planets inside those systems. 2 of those planets have human settlements. 60,000 people. 60,000 people in non-sovereign colonial zones, said Director Voss of the Vorkai, his silver fingers laced together on the table. They are residents, not citizens. The clause is legal under Galactic Charter Section 14, Paragraph 9. Section 14 was written before humanity joined the Council, Voss said. Correct, said Voss. Which is exactly why it applies. A ripple of soft laughter moved around the table, not cruel, but dismissive. The kind of laughter that said, this argument again. Voss let them finish. She had expected it. Ambassador, said Chancellor Orin, leaning slightly forward, humanity has made its concerns known. They are noted. But the peace accord depends on stability, and stability requires that the Council's decisions be respected by all members equally. If we bend the Charter for humanity today, we bend it for the Drenethi tomorrow, and for the Seal the cycle after that. The structure collapses. He spread his 4 hands wide, as if showing her how fragile the whole thing was. You would not want that. Voss looked at him for a long moment. Then she looked at the walls. They were still pale blue. No, she said quietly. We would not want that. She reached into the small case beside her chair and placed a single data chip on the table. Flat, black, barely the size of a human thumbnail. No one moved to take it. What is that? Asked the Seal representative, its voice a synchronized hum from what appeared to be 1,000 tiny mouths. A copy of a message, Voss said. Sent from this station, 2 years ago, to the Drenethi Conclave. She paused. Specifically, to the faction within the Conclave that has been funding pirate raids on human shipping lanes in the outer belt. The walls shifted, just slightly. A trace of violet. Director Voss did not move. Chancellor Orin's 4 eyes blinked, one after another, in a slow wave. The Drenethi representative, a pulsing mass of deep violet flesh, went completely dark, its bioluminescence shutting off entirely. That message, Voss continued, came from a Council administrative relay, encrypted with a Level 6 Council cipher. It approved 3 specific shipment routes through restricted space and suggested optimal times for interception. She folded her hands. 61 humans died in those raids. We have been investigating quietly for 18 months. The silence in the room was total. This is an accusation, said Chancellor Oren, and his voice had changed. Not panicked, not guilty, but careful. The voice of someone recalculating. It is a fact, Voss said. There is a difference. She let that sit. I want to be very clear about what I am saying, she continued. I am not here to threaten. I am not here to posture. Humanity has spent 11 years being told that the peace accord is sacred, that the council's structure must be respected, that we are bound by rules older than our civilization. She picked up the data chip and held it between two fingers. We respected those rules. And while we did, someone at this table used those same rules to route pirates to our ships and kill our people. She set the chip back down, very gently. We are requesting an emergency review, an independent investigation, and the immediate suspension of the REL expansion clause pending the outcome. Voss found his voice first. These are extraordinary claims, which is why we have extraordinary evidence, Voss said. 7 more chips, 24 secondary sources, intercepted financial transfers, crew testimonies from captured raiders who are currently alive and very willing to speak. She smiled, and it did not reach her eyes. We have been patient. We have been quiet. We thought that was what you wanted from us. The walls were deep violet now, almost purple. No one had ever seen that color before. Chancellor Oren looked at Voss for a long time. He had managed the long peace through 3 centuries of close calls and quiet betrayals and species who thought they could push just slightly past the line. He was very good at reading rooms. And what he read in this one, for the first time in a long career, was something he had not encountered before. Humans, it turned out, did not get angry the way other species did. They did not heat up quickly and cool down fast. They did not rattle their armor or bare their teeth in the first moment of conflict. They did something far more unsettling. They waited. They gathered. They said nothing, for months, for years, until they had everything they needed. And then they walked into a room full of the most powerful beings in the galaxy and calmly placed a chip on the table. Ambassador Voss, said Chancellor Oren slowly, if what you are presenting is verified, it will be, she said. Then we are looking at a fundamental breach of the peace accord itself. Not by humanity. He stopped. By a council member. Yes, said Voss. That is exactly what you are looking at. No one spoke. The walls held their deep, uncertain purple, and somewhere in the vast station's core, the long peace. 300 years of careful, managed, quietly corrupt stability, cracked along a seam so thin that no one had even known it was there. Lena Voss picked up her case, straightened her uniform, and looked around the table one final time. We'll expect a response within 48 hours, she said. After that, humanity will be making decisions of its own. She left the room. The walls, behind her, slowly turned red. The 48 hours passed. No response came. Not an official one, anyway. What came instead was a private visit, at hour 31, from a junior Myrati aide who slipped through a side corridor of the human delegation's quarters and asked, in a very low voice, whether Ambassador Voss might be open to a quiet conversation about alternative resolutions. Voss thanked the aide politely and asked him to leave. At hour 44, a Vorkai legal representative sent a sealed message suggesting that the data chip might be interpreted as stolen council property and that humanity could be facing a counterfiling under Charter Section 22. Voss forwarded the message to her legal team, flagged it, and went to sleep. When the 48 hours expired, she was already sitting at her desk with a fresh cup of coffee and a very specific document open on her screen. The document had no title. It was 23 pages long. It had taken 9 years to write. 3 hours later, Voss walked back into the council chamber. This time she did not come alone. Behind her walked Deputy Ambassador Rincalix, a tall man with the kind of calm that came from having defused 4 genuine military crises in his career, and Dr. Yara Suth, humanity's head of galactic law, a woman who had memorized the entire Galactic Charter including its appendices, its amendments, and its original handwritten drafts, and who regularly corrected council lawyers in real time. The chamber was full. Every seat taken. Even species who did not normally attend open sessions had sent observers. Word had spread fast, the way bad news always does. Chancellor Oren looked older than he had 2 days ago. Ambassador, he said, the council has discussed your request, and I'm withdrawing the request. Voss said. That stopped him. I'm not asking for an investigation anymore, she continued. We've completed our own. She nodded to Calix, who placed a full data packet on the table. Not a single chip this time, but a wide flat drive that expanded as it connected to the chamber system. Files bloomed across the central display: financial records, intercepted transmissions, navigational logs, raid coordinates, payment schedules, names. 41 names. One for each council species. Not all guilty. Most were clean, but every single one tagged, reviewed, and either cleared or flagged. The council could see, in real time, exactly how thorough humanity's work had been. We've been building this for 2 years, Voss said. With respect, the council was not going to investigate itself. So we did it for you. The Drenithy representative pulsed a sharp pattern, rapid orange flickers that its translation collar converted to a single word: illegal. Under what clause? Dr. Suth asked pleasantly from behind Voss's left shoulder. She already had her tablet open. She was already looking at the Drenithy with the expression of someone who had been hoping for exactly this question. The Drenithy did not answer. The investigation was conducted by human citizens on human-registered vessels, using human-developed intelligence methods in non-restricted space, Suth continued. We collected no data from council systems. The chip Ambassador Voss presented 2 days ago was sent to us, anonymously, by a council staff member acting as a whistleblower, which is protected activity under Charter Section 7, Subsection 3. She smiled. We are completely within the law. Would you like me to continue? No one asked her to continue. No one said anything at all. The central display kept scrolling. Transaction records. Drenithy shell companies. A Vorkai Logistics subsidiary used to route false shipping manifests. A small, very quiet office inside the council's own administrative wing that had been used to generate encrypted relay messages, including the one that had killed 61 people. The office, said Voss, belongs to a private contractor employed by the council for the last 40 years. His name is on the display. He is not a member species representative. He is a hired functionary who decided, sometime around 12 years ago, that selling route information to pirate groups was a profitable side business. She paused. The Drenithy faction that used that information paid him well. The Vorkai subsidiary provided the logistics support. Neither group believed anyone was watching. Director Voss's silver hands were very still on the table. We are not accusing the Vorkai government, Voss said, looking directly at him. The data is clear. This was a rogue subsidiary, not state policy. The same is true of the Drenithy. This was a criminal network operating in the space between legal structures, using council infrastructure because it was convenient. She looked around the room. That is actually worse than a government decision. It means the council's own systems were compromised for over a decade, and no one noticed. The room absorbed that. What does humanity want? Chancellor Oren asked. His voice was quieter now, not defeated, but honest, stripped of the ceremonial smoothness that usually cushioned every word he said. It was the right question. Voss had been waiting for it. 3 things, she said. First, the rel expansion clause is suspended. The human settlements in those 3 systems are given full protected status under Charter Section 4 pending a proper territorial review with their participation. She held up a second finger. Second, the peace accords enforcement mechanism, currently managed entirely within council administrative channels, is restructured. An independent oversight body. Multi-species. Rotating membership. No single species with veto power over the investigation process. That would take years to negotiate, said the SEAL representative. Then we should start now, Voss said. She held up a third finger. Third, humanity receives formal acknowledgement from this council that the deaths of 61 citizens in the Outer Belt raids were a result of negligence in council security protocols, and that the families of those individuals are entitled to reparations from the council's general fund. Reparations, said Voss, and something in the word suggested he found it distasteful. 61 people, Voss said. They had names. You'll find them listed in the packet. Read them. The silence stretched. On the central display, the last of the files had finished loading. The full scope of it sat there, visible to everyone. Years of patient, careful work, assembled without making a sound, delivered at exactly the right moment with exactly the right documentation. It was not an attack. It was something more unsettling than an attack. It was a complete accounting. Chancellor Oren looked at the display for a long time. Then he looked at Voss. "You came prepared for us to say no?" he said. "We came prepared for any answer," she said. "That is what humans do." He was quiet for a moment. "And if we reject these terms?" Voss tilted her head slightly, as if the question were mildly interesting. "Then we publish the packet. All of it. Unredacted. To every independent news relay in the galaxy. Every species civil press. Every legal advocacy network. Every academic institution studying galactic governance." She paused. "The Council has spent 300 years telling the galaxy that the peace accord works because this institution is trustworthy. We would like to give you the chance to prove that's true. But if you choose not to, we will let the galaxy decide for itself." The walls of the chamber, which had been cycling nervously between colors since she walked in, went completely still. Pale, flat white. A color the system had apparently never displayed before, because no situation had ever required it. It was the color of a room that had run out of arguments. Dr. South quietly closed her tablet. Calix clasped his hands behind his back. Voss waited, perfectly relaxed, as 41 representatives of the most powerful civilizations in the known galaxy sat across from 3 humans in plain gray uniforms and tried to find a move that hadn't already been anticipated. They didn't find one. Chancellor Oren straightened in his chair. "The Council," he said, slowly, "will need to deliberate." "Of course," said Voss. "We'll be in our quarters." She stood, smoothed the front of her jacket, and looked around the table one last time. "Take your time. We're patient people." And she walked out again, leaving the white walls behind her, and the quiet sound of an old order trying to figure out how it had been outmaneuvered so completely by the species it had never taken seriously. The deliberation lasted 6 days. Voss spent most of that time in a small room off the main corridor of humanity's delegation wing, drinking coffee, reviewing secondary data, and occasionally playing card games with Calix and Suth. They did not pace. They did not rehearse arguments. They did not send follow-up messages or request status updates from the Council. They had said what they came to say. Now they waited, the way humans had always been good at waiting, quietly, with their hands in their laps and their eyes open. On the 3rd day, the SEAL Collective sent a private message. It was short. The SEAL never wasted words, and it said only, *, the accounting was thorough. We respect thorough work. *, it was not a declaration of support, but it was something. On the 5th day, a Mirati Council aide arrived with a tray of food, local station fare, technically edible for humans, and an apology that the deliberation was taking longer than expected. Voss thanked him and offered him a seat. He sat for almost an hour, asking questions about Earth in the careful way of someone who had been told to gather information but had become genuinely curious along the way. She answered honestly, without shaping her answers for effect. By the time he left, he looked thoughtful in a way that hadn't been there when he arrived. On the 6th day, the message came. Not a summons back to the chamber. Not yet, but a quiet, coded transmission from Chancellor Oren's personal relay. Just a few lines. The Council had agreed to terms 1 and 3 in full. Term 2, the independent oversight body, was agreed in principle, with the caveat that the structure would need to be negotiated over the following year, and humanity would be given a permanent seat on the drafting committee. It was not everything. It was not perfect, but it was real. Voss read the message twice, set it down, and told Calix and Suth. Calix exhaled, the first real breath he'd taken in days, it seemed. Suth nodded, made a small note on her tablet, and said, "They'll try to water down term 2 in the drafting phase." "Yes," said Voss. "That's why we'll be on the committee." They returned to the chamber for the formal session. The atmosphere was different this time. Not hostile, not exactly warm, but adjusted. The kind of shift that happens when powerful people have been forced to recalibrate their understanding of someone they underestimated. The representatives looked at Voss differently. Not with fear. With attention. There is a version of respect that only comes after someone has surprised you, and it is the most honest kind. Chancellor Oren read the formal agreement into the record. The REL expansion clause was suspended. The 3-star systems, including the 2 with human settlements, were placed under neutral protection status. A territorial review commission would be established within 90 days, with direct participation from the settlement populations. The reparations figure was agreed. not a massive sum by galactic standards, but meaningful and recorded permanently in the Council's official accounts as a settlement for deaths caused by security failures in Council infrastructure. Then came the moment Voss had not expected. After the formal agreement was recorded, Chancellor Oren set down his reading tablet and looked at her without the ceremonial distance that usually filled the space between them. "There is something I wish to say," he began, "not for the record." The room was quiet. "When humanity joined the Council 11 years ago," he said, "we believed we understood you. Your history, your wars, your capacity for violence." He paused. "What we did not understand, what we failed to study carefully enough, was your capacity for restraint." He let that word sit. Any other species that discovered what you discovered, the raid routes, the funding, the names, would have acted immediately. They would have filed grievances loudly, threatened sanctions, demanded emergency sessions, or worse. Instead, you spent 18 months building an airtight case in complete silence. He looked at her steadily. "That is not what children at a table do." Voss said nothing. She had not come here to be flattered. "It is what people do," Oren continued, "who have decided that they want to win, not just be heard." There was a pause. Around the table, no one interrupted. "The peace accord has held for 300 years, he said. "It has held because the species in this room were willing to maintain it. But we have, I am admitting this now, formally, in this chamber, allowed the structure of the accord to become a comfort rather than a standard. We enforced it where it was easy and ignored it where it was inconvenient." He looked at the display, where the names of 61 humans were still listed in the reparations record. "People died because of that." "Your people?" "Yes," said Voss simply. "The oversight body that we will build," Oren said, "should have been built 2 centuries ago. We did not build it because no one pushed for it. No one pushed for it because the species with the power to push were the same species benefiting from the absence of oversight." He closed his eyes briefly. "That is a thing I will carry." It was the kind of honesty that old power rarely offered. Voss recognized its weight. "We are not here to break the peace accord," she said. "We never were. We are here because we intend to live under it. And we needed to know if it was real or just a name for an arrangement that only protected people who already had protection." The room absorbed that. "And now," asked Director Voss. "Now we build the committee," Voss said. "And we do the work." She looked around the table, at the silver-skinned Vorkai, the pulsing Drenathy, the quiet hum of the seal, the dozens of other faces watching her from across the curve of the great oval table. "Humanity didn't come to the Council to sit quietly and pay our dues. We came because we believe in what this institution is supposed to be. That belief is not unconditional." She let that land. "But it is genuine." The session closed. The formal record was sealed. Delegates began to move, some huddling in quiet conversations, some heading for the exits. The seal representative paused near the door and, without turning fully, emitted a soft, synchronized tone that its translator rendered as, "The drafting committee will need someone who has read the full charter." Suth, walking just behind Voss, raised her hand slightly without breaking stride. The seal made no further comment, but something in its posture shifted, and for a species that had never lost a negotiation in recorded history, that shift meant more than it looked. In the corridor outside, away from the formal chamber and its shifting walls, Calix walked quietly beside Voss for a moment before speaking. "That went better than the worst-case scenario," he said. "Most things do," she said. "You think they'll honor it?" Term 2. "The oversight body. They'll try to delay it, reshape it. Of course they will," she said. "That's what the next phase is for." She glanced at him sideways. "Did you think we were done?" He almost smiled. "No, but I thought we might get a day." "You can have tonight," she said. "Tomorrow we start preparing for the drafting sessions." She paused at the corridor junction, looking out through the crystal viewport at the star field beyond, a thick scatter of light that stretched in every direction, each point a sun, each sun possibly circled by something living. Humanity's territory in that vast map was still small, still new. But it was not nothing. And everyone in that chamber, for the first time in 11 years, understood the difference. The drafting committee met for the first time 43 days after the formal agreement was sealed. The session was held not in the Grand Council chamber, but in a smaller working room 3 levels below. No crystal walls, no color-shifting atmosphere readers, no ceremonial lighting. Just a long table, functional chairs sized for a variety of body types, and a shared display system that all 7 species on the committee had spent 2 weeks arguing about how to configure. They compromised on a system none of them fully liked, which Suth later noted was usually a good sign. Humanity sent 3 people. So did the SEAL. The Vorkai sent 2, plus a legal observer who technically wasn't on the committee but attended every session anyway and said nothing, which everyone found mildly unsettling. The Myrites sent Chancellor Oren himself, not a junior delegate, not a representative, but the Chancellor, which surprised everyone except Voss, who had suspected he would come and had prepared accordingly. The first 3 sessions were slow. Not hostile slow. The kind of slow that comes from building something new when everyone at the table has a different idea of what new should look like. The Drenithy wanted a purely reactive oversight body, one that investigated only after formal complaints were filed. The SEAL wanted something with more autonomy, able to initiate reviews without waiting for complaints. The Vorkai legal observer said nothing, but occasionally slid documents across the table that seemed designed to make both positions more complicated. Suth sat through all of it with her tablet, her annotated charter, and a patience that had clearly been trained over many years of watching other people argue about things she had already solved. She waited for the right moment, the way Voss had taught her, not the moment when the room was ready to listen, but the moment just before, when the room was tired of not listening. That moment came in the 4th session, when the Drenithy representative and the senior SEAL voice had been circling the same structural disagreement for 40 minutes, and the room was beginning to generate the specific kind of silence that meant everyone was thinking about giving up for the day. Suth placed her tablet flat on the table and said, calmly, "There is a precedent." Everyone looked at her. Charter Section 31, Subsection 12, written in the 91st year of the Accord. She turned her tablet so the display faced the room. It was drafted to govern the short-range territorial disputes of the Velkin cluster. Never implemented, because the Velkin cluster situation resolved before it could be. But the mechanism is complete. It includes both reactive and proactive investigative authority, with tiered activation thresholds for each. She looked at the Drenithy. Your concerns about overreach are addressed in Clause 3. She looked at the SEAL. Your concerns about delay are addressed in Clause 7. She looked at the Vorkai legal observer. And the jurisdictional ambiguities your documents keep raising are resolved in the attached appendix, which I have taken the liberty of pre-annotating. There was a silence of a different kind. You found this one? Asked Chancellor Oren. Before the first session, Suth said, I wanted to see if the committee could reach a similar structure independently. We were close, but we were losing time. She paused. May I continue? She continued for 45 minutes. By the end of it, the committee had a working framework, not finished, not polished, but real and buildable. The Drenithy representative, who had been visibly resistant since day one, sat quietly for a moment after Suth finished, and then emitted a slow amber pulse that the translator rendered as efficient. Coming from the Drenithy, that was practically a standing ovation. The framework took another 4 months to refine, debate, redraft, redebate, and eventually ratify. It was not a perfect document. Voss did not believe in perfect documents. She believed in documents that were honest about their own limits and built with enough flexibility to be improved. This one was. The Independent Accord Oversight Body, called the IOB in shorthand, which someone in the Council Press Office immediately tried to rename to something more dignified, and failed, was formally established on a Tuesday by Galactic standard reckoning. Humanity held 2 of the 11 rotating seats. The SEAL held 2. The remaining 7 rotated among the other species on a 5-year cycle, with no species eligible to hold a seat during any cycle in which they were under active investigation. That last clause had taken 3 weeks of argument on its own. The Vorkai legal observer had finally spoken, on day 19 of that argument, to say that the clause was unnecessary because no self-respecting species would allow itself to be in a position of conflict of interest on an oversight body. Suth had looked at him for a long moment, and then, without saying a word, pulled up the data packet from the Outer Belt investigation and placed it on the shared display. The clause stayed. The 61 names from the reparations record were read aloud at the IOB's first official session, not as a political statement, not as a reminder of leverage, but as a record. Voss had requested it. She had written the names herself, from the original raid reports, in the months before the council chamber confrontation. Reading them aloud was not about blame anymore. It was about the fact that a structure built to protect people should know the names of the people it had failed to protect. No one argued against it. Back on Earth, in the city of Nairobi, where the human delegation had its home offices, a small wall in the entrance corridor of the Ministry of Galactic Affairs was quietly updated. It had always held a single printed statement from humanity's first council ambassador, written on the day of their admission 11 years ago. "We are here to learn," the statement stated. Below it, a new line was added, unattributed, because Voss had insisted she didn't want her name on it. It read, "We learned. The settlement populations in the 3-star systems, the 60,000 people whose status under the REL expansion clause had started all of this, voted in their territorial review. 2 of the 3 systems chose independent status within the Council's protection framework. 1 chose formal incorporation into human-governed space. All 3 choices were honored. The Review Commission finished its work in 7 months, which was, by galactic standards, extraordinarily fast. The seal noted publicly that this was because the humans on the commission came to every session having already read the relevant documents. The Vorkai said nothing. The Drenithis sent a brief communique calling the speed alarming, which Calix framed and hung in his office. The criminal contractor, the one who had run the Information to Pirates operation out of a quiet council office for 12 years, was tried under galactic law. It took 18 months. He was convicted on 47 counts. The Drenithi faction that had funded the raids was formally sanctioned. The Vorkai subsidiary was dissolved. The individuals responsible were named, tried where possible, and where not possible, permanently barred from council contracts and registered formally in the IOB's new accountability database, which was, notably, public. The galaxy could see it. All of it. Voss was called, in the months after, to give briefings to a dozen different species diplomatic corps who wanted to understand what had happened, not just tactically, but philosophically. How had humanity managed it? How had they stayed quiet so long? How had they resisted the instinct to escalate early, to shout, to threaten, to make noise? She gave the same answer every time. "We have a very long history of being underestimated," she said. "You learn, after a while, that being underestimated is not a problem to solve. It is a resource to manage." One Mayority diplomat, toward the end of a long evening session, asked her a different kind of question. "Were you ever afraid it wouldn't work?" Voss thought about the 48 hours of silence after the first chamber meeting. She thought about the 6 days of deliberation. She thought about Calix exhaling when the message came. She thought about the moment she had placed the first data chip on the table and watched the walls change color. "Yes," she said. "But being afraid that something won't work is not a reason not to try." She picked up her coffee. "It's a reason to prepare better." The galaxy, for a long time after, would remember the year that humanity walked into the Galactic Council's Great Chamber and quietly dismantled 3 centuries of comfortable assumptions. Not with weapons, not with fleets, not with threats loud enough to echo across star systems. With paperwork, with patience, with 61 names written by hand. And a data chip, barely the size of a human thumbnail, placed gently on a table, and left there for the most powerful beings in the known galaxy to decide what kind of institution they actually wanted to be. They decided correctly. Humanity made sure of it.